Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host. I'm a filmmaker on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode I pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on streaming. I pick a favourite film from that topic and battle it out against a guest to decide which film will become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 1. Hello, podsters or podroonies, if you prefer. Yes, we are back again for another episode of the Film vs. Film podcast. Nearly forgot my own podcast there. This episode has a little film called, hang on, checks notes, Superman is out in the cinema. We are, of course, talking Superman films, as there have been quite a few films featuring the guy with the red cape and red boots. And of course, I am joined by another returning guest, hoping to boost his stats on the League of Podcasts. Andrew from the Revisionist Almanac podcast. How are you, sir?
I am wonderful, Martin. It's a pleasure to be back. I'm a little bit worried, though, to be honest, that my 2-0 record might come undone today. We'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, when I was rewatching it, I had the same thoughts. One of them I remembered being better, and the other one I remember being worse. So,
correct. I am in the same boat, and we'll find out where we stand on which of those we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I did bring my red underpants for this one, so don't worry, I'm ready.
Okay, yeah. I am not wearing mine because it's far too hot, as we have already mentioned off mic. So, as we are talking about a god man in comics, tell us about yourself, as you're basically a god of podcasting now. Well, tell us about your podcast and where can we find you, sir?
I appreciate that. I'm definitely in my Clark Kent era right now. I'm trying to hide my superpowers a little bit. No, I'm the host of the show, the Revisionist Almanac. So for anyone who's not familiar, what I do is every month I get together with a couple of guests, and the 3 of us or the 4 of us will go back to a specific film year. We'll pick one year. We'll watch like 40 movies of all the things that were nominated for the Oscars, things we loved. We'll then basically look at what won the Oscars. We'll kind of completely throw that to the side, and we'll decide what we think should have won the Oscar. And then we put it up to head-to-head polls online, and we let the audience decide what the actual best things were from a year. So it's got an interactive element to it, and I like to look at the award ceremonies, but I also like to take them down a little bit, because I think in most situations you'll find the things that win awards are rarely looked at 20 years later as the best of a given year.
Yeah, I love the concept of your show, and it kind of just highlights a little bit how kind of silly like award shows are, in my opinion, and you know, because it's all subjective, isn't it? I mean, I always find that the best films ever made, you're always going to find people that really don't like them. You're never going to please everyone. So yeah, it's a great show. Do check Andrew's podcast out.
I felt very vindicated, Martin, I must say. Somebody sent me a clip about 48 hours ago of Seth Rogen doing an interview, and he was answering a whole bunch of various questions because he's got a new show out there called The Studio for Apple Plus, and so he's like involved in the Hollywood industry. And Seth Rogen on this questionnaire said, he's like, I have this crazy idea for the Oscars. Hear me out. He's like, why don't we wait 5 years and then award things? And a bunch of people sent it to me, and they're like, oh my gosh, Seth Rogen has literally ripped off your idea. So now I'm hard at work trying to get in touch with Seth Rogen's people and see if we can make something happen.
Nice. Excellent stuff. So the new Superman film, then, directed by James Gunn. We have a new Superman, people. David Corenswet, a new Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan. Lex Luthor is played by Nicholas Hoult. Well done, Martin, for remembering all those names. Yeah, I'm very excited for this one. I think, no disrespect to like the Zack Snyder films or the Henry Cavill era, it's a very, very different take, I think, and obviously we'll get into it with my pick with one of those films that he's done. You know, I feel like James Gunn is a filmmaker, probably the best filmmaker out there that can literally just translate a comic book onto screen. I am a huge fan of his Guardians of the Galaxy films, and he yeah, he just has this ability of just seeing these comic book panels and just translating them to screen in just a very satisfying way. And he oozes like so much confidence in committing to those images that you see from the comics, and has so much precision and faith that it will work. And I think he'll certainly bring that same sort of energy and accuracy to this new film. And I'm excited to see new characters like Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner, who's a Green Lantern in this. So it'll be interesting to see how that works with a Superman in a world where other superheroes already exist. That's not really been done before. I don't think from a standalone, technically, Superman film. So yeah, I'm very excited. I think, yes, there's been a lot of criticism about the suit. I remember that quite clearly when you first saw like the leaked photos of the suit. A lot of negativity about that, but I was always just like, no one's seen the film yet, people. Wait until it comes out. What's your thoughts on this new film then, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited. It's the most anticipated movie for me of the next 3 months, partially because my kids are at that age right now, 5 and 7, where they're starting to graduate towards more. They're a little bit beyond just like the really small children movies. And now when we go to the theater and they see a trailer for Superman, they're like double thumbs up, like, let's go see that. So part of my anticipation is now seeing things with my kids, which adds a whole new layer to it. But just in like from a personal level, it feels like we lived through the peak of the superhero era, for lack of a better term. And it felt like in the post Nolan Dark Knight world, everyone was trying to make the darkest, most realistic, most grounded superhero fare. And some of it's great and some of it's not. But I'm kind of looking forward to this movie and then Fantastic Four both giving like throwback vibes. Like I'm here for a little bit of levity in my superhero movies. I don't need everything to be so serious. Why so serious? I don't know. I'm here for fun.
Yeah, the Fantastic Four film is going back to this kind of 60s look, which is really exciting. I mean, are you a fan of James Gunn's previous work? Like, are you a fan of the Guardians of the Galaxy films for you?
Yeah, so James Gunn's actually from the city I'm in, St. Louis. So he definitely like grew up in this area, and people know him before he went off to Hollywood and became this big, super mega Hollywood industry person. So like he's got grassroots kind of in my neck of the woods, and I've always been a fan of his all the way back to Slither, which is a really fun kind of dark comic horror movie. And then Guardians just changed the game in terms of he showed with the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise. I remember when that movie came out, nobody had expectations for it. Nobody was familiar with any of the characters on like a mass level. And yet he made it to where everyone felt connected to those characters. And I've heard people are a little bit trepidatious about the amount of characters he's packing into this new Superman movie. And I'm just telling those people, like, let's just wait and see, because he's got a proven track record. He can work with a large ensemble. He can get all those storylines across, bring us emotional, satisfactory conclusions. I trust James Gunn a lot. I think he's the right person to be in charge of DC Studios right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's already stated as well that these extra characters like Green Lantern, Hawk Girl, Mr. Terrific, they are important to the story, but they're very much supporting. They're here for Superman's story. So I'm not expecting like large amounts of scenes from those characters. Obviously looking forward to seeing them, but I'm not putting my expectations super high that they're all going to like team up at the end or something. I think that would be ultra too cliched. And I think James Gunn is too good a filmmaker to kind of do that, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm very, very excited for this one. The projections with ticket sales and things seem very, very strong.
And especially the whole idea of having the dog crypto there is such a fun injection of energy. And I think what I've seen of that character in like the little trailers and little stuff they've shown online, it feels like that's going to be more of the tone, where there's still an element of seriousness to it, but he can sprinkle the magic in to where this is going to be a mass appeal movie, which I think we need right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, certainly in the political world right now, like a good-hearted Superman is exactly what we need.
Yes.
And yeah, apparently Crypto the dog is based on his own dog.
Uh-huh.
Of course. Yeah, very excited. So we are talking, obviously, Spider-Man films. No, wait, Superman. I'm being nice, as this hero is good-hearted, so I'll let you go first. So what is your film of choice for you, sir?
Okay, well, we're here to talk about Superman 2, but not the Superman 2 you might be thinking of. Most people are familiar with the theatrical release of Superman 2, which is in my hands. Throw that one to the side, folks, because we're here to talk about the Donner cut. Now, this one came out in 2006. There's a whole lot of backstory behind it. We could spend an hour and a half just talking about the backstory, but a short version is Richard Donner shot the original Superman in 1978 and then was also simultaneously shooting Superman 2. And he got like 3/4 of the way through. Some stuff happened. He ended up getting replaced as director. Marlon Brando got completely removed from the Superman 2 theatrical cut. And then for years, all of that footage just sat on the floor. And finally, when Superman Returns came out in 2006, the studio got Brando's family estate to approve his footage to be used in that movie, which opened the door to bring Brando's character back in to what Donner had shot. And Donner, with some other people, worked to create this sort of corrected cut of Superman 2. Yeah. So if you're familiar with the theatrical version, I promise you there's a lot different with what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kind of scenes what other scenes are kind of added or removed in this new cut?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because a lot of times when you think about like a director's cut, and the Snyder, we're going to be talking about Zack Snyder on the flip side of this, but everyone's familiar with the Snyder cut, which has sort of become famous these days, especially in online communities. He made his Justice League Snyder cut, which ended up being 4 hours. And there's this association that a director's cut will inherently be longer. And the beauty of the Donner cut is it's actually 11 minutes shorter than the theatrical cut. And much of the dialogue from the theatrical cut was put in by the director who replaced Richard Donner, Richard Lester. And so the Donner version has substantially different dialogue. It kind of scraps together some stuff that never made the light of day. It brings Marlon Brando's character back into the film, which he's not in any second of the theatrical version. So there's quite a bit different, but the main thing is the theatrical version is very campy, and the Donner cut tries to do a little more with feeling grounded in terms of it feels more like the 78 original than this like kind of slapstick version that got released to the theaters.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard to get rid of the campy, to be fair.
Yeah, we're in the 70s after all.
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching this. Initial reactions for me, like I remember watching this, fairly young and enjoying it quite a lot, to be honest. But I could kind of recognize as well that certainly you can sort of see how action, I'm trying to put this politely, how kind of the action scenes were put together in that era of the late 70s. And yeah, I always remember kind of Gene Hackman as well. Because wasn't there an issue with Gene Hackman as well, that he kind of left the project as well at some point? And there's a lot of shots in the theatrical version where you just see the back of him and it's a different actor. That's what I read. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. It's a very simple story for Superman. But yeah, I think for me, like, Christopher Reeve is the ultimate Superman, and the guy embodies Superman. I also recently watched the Christopher Reeve story. I think that's what it's called, Superman, with a slash in the middle. That was an excellent insight into the man, about how these films were made. And certainly with that documentary, they don't. It's not all about obviously his Superman career. It's his whole life and his relationships and his relationship to Hollywood, etc. Yeah. So if you haven't seen that, I would certainly watch that as well. But yeah. So what was your initial reactions when you first saw this, Andrew?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned the Super/Man documentary, because I saw it as well about, 6 or 8 months ago, and I was really moved by it. I'm turning 40 this year, so I'm of the age where I remember Christopher Reeve like still being in the public conscience after the accident. Like, he was still on television in the United States, and he would do interviews and things like that. So it was interesting to go back and watch that documentary and see all that footage that I hadn't thought about in a long time. For me personally, even before Batman, the Michael Keaton version, which was one of the first things I saw as a kid, Christopher Reeve in the original Superman is probably the first superhero movie I ever saw. I am old enough to sort of remember that. So, like, that's still the archetype for me of what a superhero is, a Superman is. Christopher Reeve just kind of embodied that for me in a large way. So going back and revisiting Christopher Reeve's version, even the bad ones, even if, like, we're not going to talk about Superman 4 or anything like that, but even the bad ones, he has such a charm and a magic to him that kind of transcends the quality of the film, which might be the case for the Donner Cut, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. Were there any other films in contention for you, or was it very much the Donner Cut for you?
I had contemplated Superman Returns, the Brandon Routh version from 2006. Yep. I don't have, like, fond memories of it. I can't say that I think it's a bad movie. It's just it's kind of a forgettable movie for me, which maybe means I should at some point revisit it, but it's just not one that I actively think about, because for me, there's Christopher Reeve and then there's Henry Cavill, and those are sort of the two Supermen for me. And Ruth is just kind of lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and that suit is really bad as well.
Yes.
It's really terrible. It's like, it's a very, like, muddy browny red with the symbol, and the symbol is too small, and it's really bad.
Yeah,
and the cape looks like really leathery. Like, what were they thinking?
I like the idea of taking sort of a relative unknown actor and putting him in a. It's kind of like what they're doing with David Cornsweet, and I'll be fascinated to see if he does more with the character and resonates more with an audience than Ruth did. I think he will. I think Cornsweet seems like the nice balance between the brooding Henry Cavill and the sort of charming, endearing Christopher Reeve, who you just kind of want to be friends with. He just seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what happens in Superman 2, The Donner Cut?
All right, so I pulled this straight from Letterboxd. I wasn't going to try to come up with my own clever idea. So this, as I've said before, this is the version you've never seen, people. So Superman agrees to sacrifice his powers to start a relationship with Lois Lane, unaware that 3 Kryptonian criminals he inadvertently released are now conquering the Earth.
Excellent stuff. Short and sweet, that's how I like it. So let's get straight into directing then. So I kind of loved the opening scene on Krypton for me. I kind of love how simple it is. You can definitely feel that kind of Kubrick 2001 influence a little bit there, you know, with the design of that, like, kind of big dome that they have. You know, the idea of General Zod being trapped in, like, a space mirror, I thought was kind of really clever, playing into kind of the visual effects of the day. So, yeah, very simple, but very effective, I think, still, even now.
I had no idea you were going to start off with a Space Odyssey reference, because I watched it for the 4th time in a week today, and I've just kind of been, like, picking out different parts every time I go back to it. And the one that I wrote down today as a note is, after there's, like, a little scene that happens on Krypton, and this movie also parallels a lot of Man of Steel. There's a lot of similar plot points between the two. But at one point, Kal-El, as a baby, gets shipped off of Krypton to Earth. And there's a shot of him kind of floating in space, this baby. And I wrote down on my notes, I was like, I wonder if this baby is the baby from 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's obviously not, but it made me think, like, ooh, I wonder if 2001 is a Superman movie, kind of quietly tucked in there. It's not, but it was like a funny thing I wrote down. The whole idea of Zod and his cronies getting stuck in that mirror just made me chuckle, because it's bad CG, but like, for the 70s, it's not terrible.
No.
But I think kind of the charm of this Donner Cut is, again, they had to scrap together all this footage that wasn't 100% put together. And so there's kind of this, like, everything's a little rough around the edges. It's not neat and tidy. And that kind of adds to the charm of the movie, is it's kind of messy. It's kind of ugly. But that's okay, because you're like sort of seeing, it almost feels like you're seeing a rough cut that's not fully polished, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. This is what Richard Donner was going for, and he just never got to see the vision all the way through. But I do like the way it opens with again, immediately I watched Superman 2, the theatrical, before watching the Donner cut, and the open is completely different. Marlon Brando, like I said, is not in the theatrical. So I love that Donner opens his cut with Brando. And it's like, okay, this is a dramatically different movie than what got released to the public. So that was really fun to see Brando back in that role.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. You can definitely see kind of some of the rough edges with some of the scenes. But yeah, with that effect, it feels quite terrifying. The fact that you're just stuck in a glass plane, sort of, floating in space. It feels certainly scarier than what happens in Man of Steel. They just get, transported to a pocket universe, I guess, the Phantom Zone. Whereas this, it just feels more terrifying. Because all you see is just them just floating with their hands like clasped up against the glass, like screaming in terror. So we forget this is like a film for kids, but that's just like quite a striking image for me. And certainly, as I said, like utilizing the effects of the day brilliantly for me.
Yeah, and on my show, I've been digging into the 1970s over the last couple of months, just for film years. And in recent months, I've watched Logan's Run, which comes out in the mid 1970s, and it comes out like
about campy.
Exactly, it comes out a year before Star Wars, and this kind of fits in that same mold where it's like you could tell the effects were still like they were still discovering what was even capable of the late 1970s. And so this movie felt like the nice mix between Logan's Run and Star Wars, where it's like there's still a little bit of cheap CG budget in there, but like they're trying really hard, and there's greater themes and there's a greater director behind this. And so, yeah, it was just very fun to watch Zod floating and twisting in this little 2D mirror.
Yeah. So the scene where Superman goes into this kind of crystal chamber to turn himself human, I thought was good, but especially from certainly Christopher Reeve, but because he's doing it for his love of Lois, for some reason Lois isn't that present in the scene very much at all. We don't really get any sort of reaction shots of how she feels about all this. Just a few wide shots here and there where we don't really see her face at all. So I found that a little bit odd in that particular scene, and certainly goes to your point where it just feels a little bit rough around the edges with finding the edit for this film. So that felt a bit strange to me. Obviously, maybe they didn't have the footage available, and maybe they had planned more shots of Margaret Ritter for that scene, because she just feels a bit isolated in that. I know the focus is very much on Superman in that moment, but that scene just didn't feel right, in my opinion.
Yeah, if I had to ding this movie on from like a directorial level, like we're talking about now, the editing is definitely the weakest component of it, because it's again, they're just scrapping together what they have, and you could tell, like you pointed out, there are some spots through this movie where you're like, okay, if this is a rough cut and they had some time to fine tune it, there's probably some things they would have gone back and been like, let's add a little touch here, let's add a little touch there. There's some disconnect when it comes to like the jailbreak scene. There's some spots where it feels either too long or too short in various points, and it just needs a little finesse. But again, that's kind of the charm of this movie, is it's like it's kind of silly and it's kind of dumb, and but my takeaway from any Superman movie really is, when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, what's the dynamic between Lois and Clark Kent, and how are those two actors going to work off of each other? We obviously haven't seen much from the new Superman that's coming out, but it looks like Corin Sweat and Brosnahan have electric chemistry together from everything I've seen. I think Kidder and Reeve have delightful chemistry between the two of them from the original, and every scene they're in this movie together is my favorite stuff about the movie. Like they really had a good shorthand, it felt like, between the two of them.
Yeah, Kidder for sure is my favorite. Lois Lane, she's just got this, as you say, spunk about her and feistiness. Yeah, she's fantastic. Is there any like specific scenes where you feel the the editing for you just isn't right, just doesn't feel right? Or...
Yeah. It's so funny. There are a few moments in this where I like my jaw dropped from like just the shock of it. So there's a scene at one point where Zod and his cronies have sort of taken over this little town, and they're getting ready to go to Washington, D.C. to take over the White House. And it hard cuts to the Washington Monument. And all of a sudden, the Washington Monument just falls over. And it's like, it's this really cheap effect. And I'm like, there's no explanation for what happens with it. It just tips over. And then they cut to them in the White House. And I was like, okay, again, this is just, it's very rough around the edges. It feels like the cheapest little prop cut they've ever made. There's some things they could have refined there. That was really the one. I kept going back to that Washington Monument toppling over, and I'm like, that's just the goofiest little, it's probably this small little sound stage, and they've got this little prop and they knock it over, but it was just very silly to me.
Yeah, I just wish there was just a scene with Zod like talking to Non and saying like, I don't like that pointy thing. Cut it over. Cut it off.
Yeah, because it falls out of nowhere, and there's nothing else happening in the frame.
Very random for me. Talking about the action, though, I quite enjoyed the battle in Metropolis at night. Like the flying scenes still look pretty good for me. Maybe setting it at night is probably a wise move. I enjoyed the moment when Zod is kind of using his heat vision to try and blow up a tanker, and Superman uses the wing mirror to deflect the beams back at Zod. And you have this kind of brilliant like red flash effect, and the environment around Zod is kind of burnt. That was cool effect for me. You get like the traditional punches and throws where they fly through the air and crash into buildings, things that you would expect. That's always fun. I especially like, though, the scene where Superman and Jack O'Halloran's character end up underground, and you got this brilliant like camera shaking as if the ground is shaking because of their fight underground. And I loved how Superman punches him through the ground and then through a building. That was very cool for me. Definitely the one scene where I was like, okay, this could be like a sort of a Zack Snyder-y type of action scene for sure.
Yeah, the on the flip side of, we sort of talked about like there's some spots where the CG feels a little cheap and a little dated. All the flying stuff holds up remarkably well. Like it didn't feel too green screeny. It obviously, like they're doing some stuff there, but it never looked bad. There's a scene early where Superman's got to like stop a rocket, and he's like flying up to the rocket, and that didn't look terrible. One of my favorite shots, and it's just, again, we're in the 70s, so you have to remember sort of the time period. The 1970s are heavy on disaster movies, earthquake movies, things like that. There's this great scene where Zod and his guys are like, they've had the big battle, and the people of Metropolis are coming sort of to coming at Zod, and they do their like whistle blowing power. And so they're blowing the wind, and then they cut to all the people reacting to the wind, and it sort of felt like this 70s disaster movie, but in kind of a fun, novel way, where I was like, okay, that's a pretty cool way to, the editing worked out there, because they would cut to Zod doing his crazy blowing, and then they would cut to the people like holding on to lampposts and all of these things, and it was just again, it was fun. It was the right kind of camp. It added just a levity to Superman, which I like my Superman kind of fun and kind of enjoy. Like I don't need it to be that dour. This is my wheelhouse.
Yeah, it definitely reminded me of things like Earthquake and the Poseidon Adventure, that sort of thing. Those are certainly my favorite disaster films of that era. Towering Inferno is a fun one too. Overall, I think the action, it's fun, silly, and goofy. I'm always wondering, though, if you show this to younger audiences, would they appreciate it? I don't know. I mean, have you shown your kids the Reeves films?
That's such a good question. I was just thinking, I haven't yet, but what's wild is I showed them over the weekend. I showed them Jaws because it was a big 50th anniversary, and we're sort of talking about the same time period. They loved Jaws, and then immediately they discovered on the channel I was watching, they could see the sequels pop up, and they're like, let's watch Jaws 2 and 3. And I said, do we have to? And they said yes. And so we did. we watched Jaws 2 and 3, and I thought, okay,
I'm sorry.
We haven't made it to the revenge yet. We haven't gotten to Michael Caine.
Oh dear. Which paid for one of his houses. Yeah.
Exactly. But for a 5 and a 7-year-old, they were kind of with it. And so like they had a decent time, which I wasn't expecting. So I actually do think they probably have a good time with this. But my 7-year-old especially is very into like the Marvel of today. Like he watches the Iron Man movies on his tablet. So I don't know how much he'd connect with the low budget aspect, but I do need to probably show that to them at some point because they need to understand where Superman came from, for me at least.
Yeah, absolutely. If you love Superman, you got to be a completist.
Exactly.
For sure. Favorite scene for you, Andrew, from a directional point of view?
Man, as much as I want to say the Washington Monument, which I do love, no, the scene for me that makes this movie, and it kind of sums up what Reeve and Kidder get right about the characters. It's the scene in the hotel where, the movie starts off and Lois is already understanding that Clark is Superman, and she's sort of testing him as the movie's going on, and she's sort of investigating all the things. And then finally this moment happens where Clark comes into her room and they're getting ready to go out on a date, and she pulls out a gun, and spoiler alert, she shoots him, and he reveals that he is indeed Superman, and it turns out that she used a blank to shoot at him. And it was this great moment where Kidder plays the part perfectly, where I don't know, I love their dynamic, and I also think Christopher Reeve plays Clark Kent better than anyone else has played Clark Kent. Like he gets the idea that you can be dorky and you can be bumbling. That was the word that kept coming up to me. He's sort of a bumbling Clark Kent in the right way, and then when he takes the glasses off, he immediately transforms. And so that scene in the hotel kind of captured all the magic for me of the original Superman movies.
Yeah, Christopher Reeve is definitely the actor who's played Superman and Clark Kent that can switch between the two seamlessly. I don't think like Henry Cavill could really do that other than to just simply taking his glasses off, Whereas Reeve, there's just something in his eyes, something the way he holds himself that he can transform himself. I don't know what it is. It's just quite extraordinary for me. And yeah, that scene in particular is the embodiment of how he can change roles. Yeah, absolutely fantastic. For me, I really kind of liked a lot of the funny action. A lot of the action is great, as we've talked about, but some of it is really funny, which I really enjoyed. And you've got to love General Zod riding a moon buggy. Definite highlight. The scene where Zod attacks the White House is really funny too, where at one point he's just leaning up against a wall as bullets are flying everywhere, and the other two are just flinging people about. And there's one point where like Zod is really enjoying himself mowing people down with a machine gun. Yeah, that was great for me. Just kind of the comedy, even though possibly some of it is unintentional, but I really found it hilarious. But yeah, some of the comedy action is fantastic.
I love how serious the actor playing Zod is, and yet he's wearing the craziest 1970s futuristic fashion choices one could imagine. And he is going fully, like, he's like Shakespearean trained, like he's in it, he's committed, and yet he's wearing some wild 70s garb. It was just, it was like a chef's kiss for that era.
He's got like shiny black boots, very, I don't know,
the V-neck
shirt. They've all got silk shirts on.
I also loved him doing when they come down to Earth for the first time, and he walks on the water in front of this like fisherman out there, and I love the quick cut to the human watching him walk on water, and he's just very stoically coming across. And I was like, that's just a fun little scene right there.
That reminded me just of Roger Moore Bond movies.
Yes,
for sure. I would have loved to have seen a scene with Zod's Non and Fiora where they meet the Bee Gees or something, and just like, my people, come join me, kneel. Yeah. Directing score for me, I think, as we both talked about, I think you've really got to appreciate when this was made and kind of the unfortunate circumstances Richard Donner had to experience on this film, being fired like 3/4 of the way through, and then having the opportunity to try and fix it, how he saw this movie. So I think in my score, I'm going to certainly put that into account. You know, some of the action certainly does hold up, and just the way, you know, Christopher Reeve is directed is fantastic. So I will go like a 7.3 for me.
All right, this is, man. So before I've done this episode, I've gotten to do some Denis Villeneuve films. I've gotten to do some Richard Linklater movies. Those were very easy to score, let's be honest. This movie was tricky to score because of the nature of it. I'm being very generous to Richard Donner on this score because I do think what he did, again, if you watch Superman 2 theatrical and this one back to back, which I did, you're like, okay, these are fundamentally different movies.
Yeah.
I'm going to give him an 8.1.
Okay.
Because I think he did a lot to fundamentally change the way this movie's structured. And you also have, as part of your little section here for directing, I want to shout out really quickly, the John Williams score to this movie goes so hard. It's one of my favorite John Williams scores. I mean, it's got some Star Wars notes to it, but it's definitely got a life of its own. And I think Donner uses the score perfectly. So I'm going to give it an 8.1.
Excellent. So ultimately, do you think the Donner cut is superior then?
Oh my goodness, yes.
I didn't
will
have a chance to watch the Lester one before this, but
I will never watch the Lester version again as long as I live.
Okay, definitive. Right, screenplay then. It's interesting with how this was made as well, because I think, as you said at the top of the show, I think the 2006 Superman Returns kind of revitalized the fans to ask for this kind of Donner cut. And there's a little bit, I've got the 4K disc for the Donner cut, and it's got the original cut in there as well. And there's an option where you can play a little introduction from Richard Donner before it plays, which is quite nice. And he basically said that the fans were the one that demanded this. It wasn't necessarily Richard Donner. The fans started all this. So that was kind of really interesting to learn. And it just shows the passion of Superman has on people. But certainly with the screenplay to this film, and I think this is certainly a product of the 70s era and how films were made. And I don't usually enjoy sequels of the 70s where they just recap the first film. You find it in a few sequels in the 70s, 80s era. But here it's slightly more palatable when it's being played out with Zod and co floating through space and the nuke frees them. So it kind of ties nicely together, you know, the final events of the first film to the opening moments of this. So, and then you go into the amazing grand credits, which work amazingly well with John Williams' iconic score, as you mentioned, Andrew. Yeah. I always love the credits of these films. Yeah, so I think in the end, kind of a fairly clever opening from a writing point of view.
Yeah, it's the whole idea of, like, I almost missed it the first time I was watching it, where he recaps the first movie so succinctly that it just feels like it's part of this movie. That you never see that. Usually it's like a previously on or whatever the case may be. And this one, he just drops it in enough to where you're like, okay, yeah, he's jogging the key memory points that I need to remember for where the story is. I think that when we're talking screenplay, obviously at this point, I think that what this movie does really well in terms of its screenplay, it's going to have some deficiencies here and there. It's a product of its time, obviously. I think the stuff on paper for Lex Luthor, as Gene Hackman likes to call his character, I always call him Luthor. Apparently he's a Luthor, according to Gene Hackman. It's sort of like the Han Solo. Nobody knows how to pronounce it. But I think Gene Hackman, all the dialogue that he gives in this movie is just spot on. Like, he's getting the best lines. All the dialogue is going towards him. But but Donner does a good job with the screenplay to move the story along. It's not trying to be too convoluted and too heady. It's pretty straightforward. We're getting where we need to go. We can maybe talk about the ending, which I have some questions about the whole idea of spinning the world around backwards, but
yeah. Yeah, I think certainly with Gene Hackman, I feel like he probably demanded all the best lines. I'm like, I'm only going to finish this film if I get all the best lines, okay?
Yeah, he was definitely getting the bulk of the material there. And poor Ned Beatty, who's a phenomenal actor as Otis, is just really getting relegated. Yeah.
A poor guy. Being shanked in prison, probably.
He's stuck with the bedwetter in there.
Yeah. It's interesting as well. Like, I mean, Gene Hackman's an incredible actor, and it's difficult to separate him. You know, I feel like he is the definitive Lex Luthor for me, for sure. Obviously, we'll see what Nicholas Hoult brings. He's a tremendous actor, of course. Big fan of his. It's interesting with this film as well. I feel like Gene Hackman goes a little bit missing in the middle section of the film. He has kind of great stuff in the prison, and I always really enjoyed his dialogue with Terrence Stamp and the other Kryptonians. That's always quite fun. But because you've effectively got like two villains here, Lex Luthor sort of gets pushed aside, which I think is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, there's that whole middle stretch, like you said, where you forget Lex Luthor is even in the movie, which is unfortunate because Gene Hackman's just iconic. I'm more of a Jesse Eisenberg Lex Luthor fan, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
No, I'm totally joking. I think he's dreadful.
Like, are you crazy?
I was going to see if I could keep a straight face there. I tried. No, Gene Hackman is Lex Luthor to me. As I'm hoping for Nicholas Hoult to have a good run, but I feel like Eisenberg has soured my experience so badly that it's hard for me to get past Gene Hackman in the role. He's great in it. And of course, again, everything that Kidder and Reeve are doing together, all the stuff in Niagara Falls is a lot of fun to me. I think the screenplay is pretty good. Again, it's not perfect. There's some plot things that kind of bother me, but that's just sort of, again, it's a product of its time.
Yeah, I love how kind of Superman uses his kind of brains in switching around the molecule chamber thing to make Zora non-weak towards the end. For me, the clever part is obviously relying on Lex Luthor to betray him. And I think that's the only piece of like clever writing, really. I mean, you don't want to go away from the focus of Superman's like good values that, you know, Christopher Reeve embodies brilliantly. So the moment feels more surprising as well because you don't expect this from Superman to outsmart his villain. Normally you would expect him to outmuscle him, you know, with his sheer willpower, etc. So that was kind of a really cool moment there, because at that moment you're like, oh, this is not going to go well for Superman at all. But yeah, I love that kind of little reveal there.
Yeah, something else I did in preparation for this episode was I almost completely forgot this existed, but I found a clip on YouTube of Kevin Smith talking about how he almost got to write a Superman movie effectively with Tim Burton, and he pitched it to the man who has the rights to Superman, John Peters, the producer, and John Peters wanted him to do a Superman movie with Superman never flying, never wearing his suit, fighting a giant spider, all these crazy things. And after I heard that, I'm like, okay, anything I was maybe knocking this movie on the screenplay, I'm going to bump up a little bit, because we nearly got the craziest Superman movie ever to exist, where he's not flying and he's not, you know, wearing his suit, which is crazy. Yeah, I think this is a really great companion to the original Superman, which for me is almost a perfect movie in sort of its own little bubble of, it understands who Superman is as a character. And we can talk about the idea that I have a lot of friends who aren't huge Superman people. They much more prefer Batman and the other characters because they find he's too strong. He's too vanilla for them, maybe, or whatever. I think there's a lot of complexity to the Superman character that people don't give enough credit to. And I think the Christopher Reeve movies really nail it. Like the whole idea that he would give up his powers for Lois. This movie's kind of like a rom-com and a romantic love story that's sort of disguised inside of a superhero movie. Like, it's really that stuff. And the whole scene at the diner with once he's given up his powers and he's still trying to defend Lois's honor, and then he gets beat up by the trucker. And there's ways that you can make Superman not this invincible, unstoppable superhero force that I think this movie does really well and sort of reminds people about.
Yeah, I think that's what James Gunn is going for with his version, is that I don't think he's going to be. I think he said this in interviews that he's not going to be like overpowered compared to the Henry Cavill version. But yeah, I think I certainly agree. You know, you could argue that this is sort of a screwball comedy disguised as a superhero film in some ways.
Yeah, it's kind of like mashing a bunch of different genres together at the same time, all under this superhero umbrella.
So the end. The end where Superman flies around the Earth again just felt like the first film, you know, to turn back time to see the point where Lois doesn't know Clark is Superman. For me, it felt frustrating because I feel like Lois will be able to figure it out again. So it made no sense to me. Like, he's got the best of both worlds right now before he goes back in time. He doesn't need to pretend anymore that he's Superman to Lois when he's Clark, and they love each other. So what's the issue? You know, this whole thing with superhero films that the love interest is always kind of the weakness to the hero that villains can use against them doesn't really come across that strong in this film. So, and you feel like Lois is quite a strong character anyway. So that's kind of the only reason I could think of why he went back in time again. But then looking back at the film, the scene that you've mentioned already, Andrew, I kind of love the scene where Lois tricks Clark in revealing that he's Superman by pretending to shoot him with blanks. You know, it kind of plays out with the dynamic where Clark very much loves Lois, but Lois loves Superman. But ultimately, Clark wants Lois to love him as Clark. So I think that's why he went back in time. Like, Clark wants Lois to love him as Clark, not Superman. So maybe the film sort of could have played on that more, especially at the end, to establish that sort of feeling and that fact. I think that's what the film was ultimately going for, that Lois is just very focused on the person that she loves, and that is Superman, not Clark, whereas Clark wants Lois to love him as Clark. I think it's interesting though, because obviously with Superman lore, like, his secret identity, his kind of unnatural suit is Clark Kent. It's not Superman. So you've got this kind of really great duality with this Superman Clark Kent character, that he's great at what he does in being Superman, being a hero, but that's not enough. Like, I think, you know, he really wants to be human. He wants to be like everybody else and not just a superhero all the time. So I think maybe the film could have played on that a little bit more for me. But yeah, I think that's ultimately the only reason I can think of why he went back in time again.
Yeah, it so nearly sticks the landing for me. There's like an emotional climax point where Lois is breaking down, crying basically because they can't be together in her mind. And I'm like, okay, this could go somewhere really interesting. I think if the movie wasn't made in the 70s and was made more contemporary, it would probably, like, I feel like writing has just improved over time, where people are trying to come up with different ways outside of the box. And I thought that there was a moment there where I'm like, okay, if somebody maybe had a better writing eye, they could have unpacked the end of this movie a little bit better and made it more interesting to see where those two characters go. And like you said, the whole spinning around the Earth thing just sort of felt like a rehash. And I was like, it just felt very jarring to me. And again, it might have just been a scenario where Donner did not have the footage that he had planned, because again, he's got about 25% of the movie he doesn't shoot by the time he gets fired. So maybe he had something else he was going to do at the end, and we just will never know, or didn't get to shoot. But it felt kind of shoehorned in there at the end, where I was like, man, come on. Like, we were so close to being exactly where I want this movie to be. And then the last 5 minutes, I'm like, okay, I guess. I mean, it is what it is. At least he returns to the diner once he's Superman again. And so, like, the whole world spinning around thing, isn't the very last thing on my mind when the movie is over. He goes back to the diner, he gets his revenge, and then he flies away. And I'm like, okay, it makes up for itself a little bit.
Is that in the theatrical cut as well, the diner scene at the end?
I don't believe it is.
Right.
I need to go.
Definitely need that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely feels like maybe Richard Donner was just out of options and he didn't really have a lot of choice. He had to include it.
That exactly.
Maybe that was a Richard Lester edition that he just couldn't cut out. I don't know. So, funny and interesting lines. What have you got for me, Andrew?
Well, I mean, Luther has pretty much all of the funny, interesting lines. There's quite a few of them. I think my favorite one, if I had to pull one, is it's Luther and Zod having a conversation, and Luther says, "Oh, magnificent one, what I am bargaining with is what you do not have, the son of Jor-El." And then Zod says, "The son of Jor-El?" Luther says back, "I said that, didn't I?" And he says, "Jor-El, our jailer?" And he says, "No, Jor-El, the baseball player. Yes, our jailer." And that line is so 1970s. It's so silly. It's so camp. And I don't know. That was just like the encapsulation of what Luther's doing the whole movie, is he's just dropping these little one-liners throughout the thing. And it's just keeping the humor peppered in there. Like you said, Hackman probably had something in his contract where he's like, I get the zingers here, people, because I gotta be looking good. So that was probably my favorite little line he threw in. Yeah,
that was an interesting one. I found it was funny, but I know nothing about baseball. So I was like, okay, there's probably be a lot funnier to Americans here. But I've got a few. I mean, it wouldn't take long. We could just fly right up there and zoom back down again. No, Superman. Lois to Clark Kent when she's trying to get a rise from Clark, the Superman. Oh, after Lois jumps out of the building and someone says, "Clark, have you seen Lois?" And he just says, "She just stepped out for a minute." A really weird one between, can't remember what the girl is called, and Lex Luthor, where she says, "Come on, I like trees. So does your average Cocker Spaniel." One of the most iconic ones. "What do you want?" from Zod, and Lex says, "Australia." Fair enough. Very hot down there. Some great ones from between Zod and Fiora, where she says, "He actually cares for these Earth people, like pets. I suppose so." A Zod to Lex Luthor. "Lex Luthor, ruler of Australia, activate the machine."
The Australia bit coming back multiple times was quite funny.
Yeah, definitely. One really good one from Christopher Reeve, actually, towards the end. I think the scene we just talked about at the diner. He says, "Gee, that's funny. I've never seen garbage eat garbage before." Probably the funniest line from Clark Kent. But for sure, my favorite one is from Gene Hackman when the three Kryptonians have broken into the Daily Planet, and Lex Luthor is there, and Superman arrives, and Gene Hackman goes, "Superman, thank God. I mean, get him." Brilliantly done by Gene Hackman for me.
Yeah, R.I.P. Gene Hackman. He was a legend.
Absolutely. Screenplay score for me, I'm not going to pretend that, certainly script-wise, it's very simple. But I think that certainly the strengths in this film are how Superman Clark Kent is written, and the dialogue between Clark and Lois Lane is really well done, and Lex Luthor gets great lines. There's a little bit of cleverness in there with how Superman defeats Zod, but there's nothing terribly special, I don't think, with the script, and the end is a bit iffy with the whole going back in time. I just feel like when films mess with time travel, you're just going down a slippery slope. You're opening a lot of plot holes. So I will probably go a 6.7 for me.
This was definitely the area where this movie struggled the most of the three categories we're talking about. Just, I think fundamentally it's the weakest point of it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a 7.1. I think it's borderline a good script for what it is, but there's enough flaws in there where I'm like, I can't really put this on the same level. Like, the direction's really good, the acting talent is really good. The thing I remember least about this movie is what's actually happening in the plot for the most part. Like, it's far less interesting what's going on, and it's just more fun to just be with the character. So 7.1 I feel like is probably even generous, but that's where I'm going to fall on that one.
Yeah, totally agree. So acting then, I love the little scene where Lois jumps out the window. You know, Christopher Reeve's reaction as she's going through the window is priceless. Like, there's never for one moment for Clark that she's going to do it, but then, like, the way he just stops and is frozen and says, Lois, what are you doing? is literally laugh out loud funny for me. You know, Margaret Kidder is great too. She's just so confident that Superman will save her. She does not hesitate for one moment about jumping out of a massive skyscraper. that in itself is hilarious. That she's not like, whoa, this is actually really high. 100% sure that it's Superman.
Yeah, there's really nothing you can knock with the acting, whether it's Gene Hackman and Ned Beatty going for the camp side of things, or Terrence Stamp playing it incredibly earnestly as Zod, which I love the way he's going about it, or then Kidder and Reeve having, like I said, the chemistry between those two is just off the charts. They were a match made in heaven. I love everything about the acting of this movie. I do wonder though. So Christopher Reeve died in 2004.
Right.
I wonder if he got to see any bits of this movie versus the theatrical. I assume he probably didn't, but it's a kind of a shame. I wish Christopher Reeve would have lived long enough to see this version, because he couldn't have been too proud of 2, 3, and 4. Just kind of had diminishing returns each time, and his love of Superman probably diminished over time because of it. And it would have been a nice lasting image for Christopher Reeve to see this cut, which I think does a lot to sort of restore the magic of the original Superman for me. Just, again, Kidder and him together are going to be hard to top for any Superman Lois Lane pairing going forward.
Yeah, they certainly set the standard of quality in those characters, and I don't think they've really been matched. As much as I'm looking forward to the new film, I don't think it's really going to get there. I don't think.
I also wish Kidder. It feels like Kidder, like, she didn't really have a great career in terms. Like, I don't. And I was looking it up a little bit. I'm like, why did I just miss everything she was in? She had a really serious car accident in 1990 that apparently left her temporarily paralyzed. And then, I don't remember this, I was too young, but in the mid 90s, she had a really bad manic episode where she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Again, I had no idea about these, but it felt like she was poised after the Superman movies to have a really great career as a leading lady. And it never panned out for her, which is unfortunate, because when you go back and watch the original Superman movies, she's up there with, like, one of the more interesting female characters of the 1970s. I'm digging into all these 1970s movies for my show, and sadly that decade was very male oriented, and women just didn't get a lot of roles. So it was nice and refreshing to see Kidder get, like, Lois is a strong female, feminist, empowered woman of the era, and that was really cool to go back and see.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me a little bit, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but of, like, Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia, like another really strong female character. And then she, like, well, certainly like a little bit like Mark Hamill, I guess, that didn't really kick on post Star Wars. I mean, she has an incredible performance in certainly that original film. Probably slightly more successful, I would say, but yeah, that sort of just reminded me of her career a little bit. Would that be accurate? Or
yeah, no, that's a great comparison, because it does feel like some of those 70s actors who were in the bigger blockbuster type movies that were more genre pieces. It doesn't feel like they got the opportunity to sort of branch out the way, like, nowadays, if you're in a superhero movie, it doesn't fundamentally mean that you can't do something dramatic or Oscar worthy or whatever the case may be. And in fact, you're probably going to put yourself in contention for awards if you give a really good performance in a superhero movie. Look at Angela Bassett or Robert Downey Jr., on and on. So yeah, it is kind of an unfortunate thing that some of those 70s actors who were in these big genre movies did not. Same thing with Star Trek universe. Like those actors didn't really get a lot of crossover into other work.
Yeah, I want to talk about Christopher Reeve more. Like, I really like the scene in the diner, the first diner scene where Clark gets beat up. You know, Reeves is just very good, looking quite nervous, trying to pick a fight with this trucker. Because obviously at this point he has no powers. You know, the look of pain he has is quite surprising, simply because we're just not used to seeing Superman like this at all. You know, this is not like Spider-Man where he gets hurt on the regular when he's beating up bad guys, even normal criminals. Like here, Clark is frankly getting a mild beating in the grand scheme of things, and yet he looks completely broken. You know, he's just not used to it at all. Like, Reeves portrays it really well for me. Then when he goes back to sort of the Fortress of Solitude and talks to his dad, Marlon Brando, for the final time, certainly the emotional pain and guilt definitely comes through really strongly for me, even though it feels like he's not doing too much either. I think, yeah, Christopher Reeve, when he's not in full Superman mode, certainly his Clark Kent performance in this is just as good as his Superman, if not better.
Yeah, the word that kept coming up to me when I was thinking about what he does with the flip and the duality, like you were talking about, it's effortless. It's like there's you cannot see him. You don't see the wheels turning for him to shift from one to the other. He can play that role in the diner where he's struggling and he's unsure of himself and he's got anxiety and fear. Like, you can see the fear in his eyes that he doesn't have power anymore. And then like the scene when we talked about where he reveals to Lois that he is Superman, he just has a way of posturing up that just makes him look more bulky and beefy and Superman. Like, I don't know if it's just literally the way he moves his body, but he looks so much different as Clark or as Superman, as opposed to Cavill. As much as I love Henry Cavill, and we'll talk about him on the Man of Steel portion of this, but it's just he's too big to be Clark Kent. He's just fundamentally too large of a man, and it's hard for me to buy him as Clark Kent, where I'm like, Christopher Reeve seems like an intellectual, actually.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like when he's in the Clark Kent suit that he's just really skinny and there's like no muscle under there. The suit, I feel like they've given him his suit. It feels too big for him.
Yes,
you know, that's very much done on purpose. It feels like, yeah.
Yeah, more of that, please. I need to suspend disbelief a little bit that people can't figure out that the glasses are the only really differentiator between the two.
Yeah, because obviously that's always the issue with Superman and Clark Kent, that why maybe people gravitate to more traditional, well, not traditional, but more superheroes like your Spider-Mans or your Batmans, is that they wear masks.
Right.
Whereas people forget, like, you know, Superman's secret identity is Clark Kent, and he can't like wear a mask to work.
Exactly.
It's got to be glasses and baggy suits and a bit of different hair gel.
Yeah, change the hair just a touch.
You know, the poor guy. Or just keep your head down and wear a lot of caps. But it doesn't make for a good film. It's like, I can't see this actor. Who is this supposed to be? This is Clark Kent. Oh, okay. Right. Why is he wearing a hat all the time? I can't see him.
I do think that, you know, and we're not going to talk about it, but I think Corn Sweat, from the little bit I've seen, it does look like he's done enough with the Clark Kent version of whatever he's doing where he does look a little bit different. So it also feels more Christopher Reeve-like, where I'm like, I think this guy might actually pull off believability between the two.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of fuzzy hair, I think he's got as Clark Kent. They're like, no way has Superman got that good a hair products. Right, favorite performance, Andrew? Who are you going for?
As much as I would like to go with anyone else on the board, it's got to be Christopher Reeve. He's just he's the star of the show. Everything about what we've already said. He can flip a switch and change from one to the other, and he's proven to be a superstar actor from this movie. There's a reason why this movie has lived on for years and years. It's because of him.
Yeah, same. Christopher Reeve. embodies Clark Kent, embodies Superman, and will always be the standard for Superman. I mean, we got this Corin Sweat version coming up soon, and I think there will be certainly more to come for sure. But yeah, I think it's just going to be extremely difficult for anyone to really beat Christopher Reeve for me. So in saying that, acting score, this I think will be my highest score. And I think because he's so iconic in both roles and plays them so well and is able to switch between them so brilliantly and seamlessly without seemingly doing much at all, I'm going to go with... And the fact that you got Gene Hackman here, Margaret Ridder is fantastic as Lois Lane. I'm going to go an 8.5.
Okay, we're definitely in the same ballpark. I went 8.3. I think they're all carrying a lot of weight there. There's not a whole lot to knock other than, again, the script kind of lets them down in parts, but the charm of all of them is so much that it kind of makes up for it all. So 8.3 felt right for the acting.
Excellent. Right, let's add up the scores then for Superman 2, The Donner Cut. Right, Superman 2, The Donner Cut gets exactly 46 points, which is pretty good.
I'll take it.
Yeah, could be a tight one.
We're either gonna anger the Snyder fans, or we're gonna have an army of Snyder fans behind us. There's only two options.
Yeah. Let's find out in part 2. That's it for part 1. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 2 to see who wins. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell me what your favourite films are relating to the episode. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for X at FVF_podcast. Plus, we are now on YouTube, so hit that like button and comment there. If you do, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.